Okay, welcome to the Illegitimate Scholar Podcast, the podcast where we assert our right to share our unsolicited opinions on culture, history, social studies, and human nature. This is, I think, going to be episode 11. I think I'm going to stop announcing the numbers because I don't know when I'm going to be posting them, and it's written there, so I don't need to say it. But I'm joined today by my friend Ben, my other friend Ben, not the same Ben. So I'm going to let Ben introduce himself. We're going to be talking about lawyering stuff because that's what he does or is trying to do. And yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I've known Sam for 15 years at this point?
Yeah, 15 years.
I studied philosophy in undergrad at College of the Holy Cross, and then I went to law school here in Connecticut. I've since graduated, and I'm studying to take the bar again, and as he said, trying to become a lawyer.
Yeah, so Ben finished his undergrad in 4 years, unlike...
Yeah, so I'm overqualified for this podcast.
Well, but the other Ben and Rudy, they took a while, but you've now failed the bar twice, so it's related. You didn't take 9 years to do your undergrad, but you did fail the bar twice.
That is true.
Yeah, but it's a very hard test, so I don't blame you, and you're going to pass it next time, I hope.
Me too.
Yeah, so let's start out. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about lawyering stuff today, and I have a few notes of things to talk about. Common law. We're going to talk a little bit about procedures, and I'm going to be grilling Ben about how I think that there's lots of elitist issues in
law?
In the law field.
Since when?
Yeah. since you like tightened up your frickin' tie all the way to your neck
since the powdered wigs. I see how it's going to be. Okay.
Wigs. This is what I sound like, I guess, when I'm choking myself with a tie because I'm so goddamn uptight. Okay. People versus Belgia. What does that mean? What is that?
Okay, so that's a case studied in a lot of legal ethics courses, and I want to say it's from the 70s. Essentially what happened is this guy, Garrow, he killed a young man, and he was arrested and put on trial for that. And during his time with his lawyers pre-trial, he admitted to them that he'd killed 2 other women in his time, and he drew them a diagram or told them where the bodies were. And so the lawyers are both kind of sitting there. One of them doesn't have any experience in criminal defense, and so he actually recruits his buddy to help him out. And so these guys are kind of sitting there like, well, all right, now we have to go check this out to make sure you're not lying to us, or at the very least that the bodies are still there. And they go, they confirm both bodies are where the client said they were going to be. I think at one point they even moved one so they could, not far, so they could get it within the frame of a picture, so they could get all the evidence documenting the crime scene. But then after the fact, they did not tell anyone nor report to any authorities they discovered these bodies. There's a lot of small details around it, maybe some stuff they said in court. I think one of the lawyer's daughters went to school with one of these girls, and so the father was trying to, plead to the lawyers, if you know anything, please tell me.
That's horrible.
It's a rough case. I mean, these lawyers were really going through it. They were not, sociopaths. They grappled with this, but eventually, at the end of the day, they decided they couldn't disclose any of this information because obviously it was incriminating to their client.
Right. So they had a legal duty to their client not to expose this information.
They did. They had he gave them privileged information. It was confidential between an attorney and client.
What is privileged information?
Well, so in the law, you have a number of privileges. One of the most sacrosanct ones being attorney-client privilege.
What does sacrosanct mean?
Sacred, essentially.
Got it. Okay.
If I tell my lawyer confidential information, they can't simply tell that to everyone. They can't admit it for me. They can't use it against my interests. They can't disclose it.
Like a priest.
Without my permission, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
But without my permission, that information is confidential. They're not to share it with anyone else. And so particularly when it comes to criminal trials, you want your defendant to be telling you the truth. You don't want to be going in there with a bunch of half-baked lies that you're basing legal theories on. You want it to be based on fact.
So I think
go ahead.
It's deeper than just the client, right? Because it's okay, so obviously when you're a client, you want to be able to go in and trust your lawyer. But the entire...
Well, you have to be able to trust your lawyer.
Right.
If the legal system is to work, you have to be able to trust them.
So at the end of the day, like ultimately at its most base level, what our court system is and what lawyers are a part of is the system of resolving like civil and legal problems. It's the system of resolving problems in our culture. And like it, you know, in medieval times, they had like priests doing justice. They had like local lords doing justice. And back to like Hammurabi having like codes of justice and prior to that. But like in hunter-gatherer societies, there are all these different types of things that they use to keep people in, to what?
Keep order.
Right, to keep order. So ultimately that's what the court system is. And I think that's why it's so important, is because like if our system relies on people being able to tell the truth to their lawyer so their lawyer can work on their side. It requires people to be able to seek out a lawyer so that they can have the best defense so that they don't get screwed over. Like it doesn't, that's one of those things that like, it seems so horrible in that extreme case. And it is horrible. That's horrible. A father, like the guy has information about his dead daughter and the father can't even learn about it, even though I'm sure the guy wants to tell the dad.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know the lawyers in this particular case struggled with that decision. At one point, I think they even tried to get a plea bargain for their client. Maybe something like, well, you know, if we have any information on the other missing women or people in the area, like, we could offer that in exchange for life in like a mental hospital rather than
dark too.
Prison. What?
That's dark too. I mean, that's fucked
sure.
up.
But I mean, there's a reason.
That's the information they're bargaining with.
Yeah, but that's what they have to do. I mean, the way we
Right.
talk about it, when something is privileged information like that, we don't just say, well, I can't say anything about that. You know, I'm bound by attorney-client privilege. I'm bound. It's not that I don't want to. It's not that I can and I just choose not to. I literally cannot do this thing
It's a legal
until...
requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a similar thing would be like HIPAA with medical staff that they can't talk about, like, or with priests as well.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Priests or reverends or whatever, they have to, you know, they have a code and people like follow that. You have to. I mean, it's but it is very uncomfortable in this particular case. Like, that's disgusting.
Yeah, and you know, these two lawyers faced criminal charges, harassment, disbarment proceedings.
But wouldn't they have been disbarred if they did share that information?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of the reality of having hardline rules, but living in the real world.
Right.
Is you're always. I mean, this is obviously an extreme example. Like, there's a reason it's, you know, a favored case in covering legal ethics generally, because that's the most extreme, you know, easy example of grappling with morality and ethics while also being bound by the reality of your situation, the relationship to your client. You know, it's hard to figure out what you do there. But I mean, part of it is also the fact that they broke, if I'm correct, several health laws pertaining to, you know, discovery of remains and handling all that.
Yeah,
so
right.
They did break the law, I think, in going there. And I think, again, handling one of the bodies, not a lot, but like moving it so it could be in frame of a photo. Like, they confirmed there were dead bodies in these locations so they could document what they were doing. I mean, when you're dealing with that, I think over documenting your professional work is probably the better option anyway.
That's pretty fucked up, dude. I mean, that's really fucked up.
But like that, you know, they were in a bad situation. They certainly could have made some different calls, but in the end they were absolved.
Yeah. That's a no-win situation. I would never want to be in that situation.
One of these guys wasn't a criminal defense attorney. He had to bring in his friend, and this is what the poor guy is dealing with.
Why did that? Oh God.
I don't remember how he ended up taking the case.
Start. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact circumstances revolving around him taking the case, but that is a bad day at work, no matter who you are.
Right. It really is. Okay. That.
It's a crazy story.
Yeah. That is a crazy story. But that's the reason that example is used in a college classroom is because it's an extreme example that's very telling about it. Like, it's the most extreme example. Most things are more mundane and obvious to that, but it's those type of extreme situations where you really like test the limits of a rule like that.
Yeah. But I mean, that case speaks to that privilege, which you're going to find in finance,
right?
Civil proceedings, everywhere else. Like, lawyers are always going to be grappling with what information is privileged and what's not, and what they can do with it. And it's one thing to struggle with the idea of reporting the location of two bodies versus maybe reporting some financial fuckery at your company. That's always going to be less clear than, that's where he said the body was going to be. That's cut and dry. Right. Dealing with other stuff, that's a lot harder.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably worse. I feel like the financial crime, like if someone steals, like Bernie Madoff, what Bernie Madoff did is probably worse than not reporting the location of two bodies. I know the location of two bodies might seem worse, but like the amount of terrible shit that happens when $1 billion gets stolen from a bunch of individual people, like some of those people probably killed themselves.
Yeah.
So like it's, but it doesn't feel that way because people are like, it's just money. But money is like your time quantified in a lot of ways. Your time, whatever it's valued, quantified. Yeah, well, not for everybody.
No.
But if you work for your money and then you invest it, then yeah, that's kind of what it is. And it's a tool. Okay. Driver's license.
I was wondering when we're going to bring this up.
Driver's license. I didn't have a good segue from that, so driver's license.
Officer, I was not driving. I was traveling. I don't need a license.
Yes. Yeah, why would you need a license to travel? This is America. Clearly, we live under the Articles of Confederation.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you have been drinking your Kool-Aid. I'm proud of you, bud.
I have. I've been listening to the legal advice of this white guy with dreadlocks from the internet, and he said that all I have to say is that I'm a sovereign citizen and I can go where the fuck I want. But you said you claimed to me that Rudy was spreading misinformation.
Oh, I don't recall doing that.
You fucking lawyer son of a bitch.
I don't recall anything, bud.
You don't recall that. Was this your plan the whole time?
Pretty much.
To just deny it? Yeah, no.
100%.
So, do you need you do need a boating license?
Well, I mean, I love Rudy dearly, but yeah, for as far as I understand, if you have a motor on board, or if it's like a sailboat of a certain size, I want to say like 19 and a half feet in Connecticut, I don't know if they call it a license, it might be certificate, but you're definitely not supposed to just buy a boat and then get on the water without doing any of that.
Okay.
And I am not well, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm definitely not a boat lawyer.
Okay.
I'm not a boat person either.
Okay. Well, I don't care enough to look it up, so it's going to still be a mystery, and you and Rudy can fight it out. So that being said, I just want to have that in there, and if Rudy listens to this episode, this will be a test, because if he does, he will mention that. I want to talk about the courtroom.
Okay.
And how people talk in the courtroom.
I bet you like all the, pomp and circumstance and honorifics. You love all that shit.
I love those things. Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody should have a numbered rank so that we know who our betters and our inferiors are at all times.
Spoken like a true Marine. Thank you for your service.
Go fuck yourself. So when you're in a courtroom, you have to talk a very particular way, and there's certain procedures you have to follow. There's certain orders of things. You have to file things at the right time. There's the bureaucratic stuff past that. Like, you have to file things at certain times. You have to talk to people in a certain way. You have to say your honor. You have to motion to whatever and stand up at certain times, and you can't have your phone out, and you can literally go to jail for swearing when you're in a fucking courtroom, right?
Yeah, if you're held in contempt, you can spend some time. Right.
So, I mean, the judge standing there, contempt of court, if someone, doesn't do what she says, or he says, the judge, I don't know why why would I not imagine the judge as a woman, actually?
I don't know.
That's perfectly fine. So if the judge or if the judge decides that you did something, like basically speak out of turn, they could just be like 30 days in jail right there. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. That's fucking wild, dude.
I mean, there are definitely there are definitely some limitations to that, but generally disobeying the orders of a presiding judge is just really dumb. If you're in the courtroom, you're already in a bit of trouble, and you probably don't need to add on to that. Yeah. Because no one wants to be in court.
But you have to, but just knowing that the judge has that level of power is like enough to like shake people into obedience, which I mean makes sense. And again, it's what the society functions on. But like, it's kind of crazy that somebody has that level of power. To me,
I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Particularly in regards to like criminal law, it makes a lot of sense because, first of all, that's their courtroom. And it's not just because it's some crazy power trip. You're talking about the administration of justice, presumably. So when you have a jury, you have to have someone there who's going to mediate the process because, like I said, there are going to be some lawyers who will say what they want or go beyond their scope. And if it's something that's objectionable, it's unfair, there are rules against it. A judge who doesn't have that level of control over their courtroom isn't going to be able to make sure they're making the correct arguments or essentially abiding by the rules.
And that's why they give the judge long-ass robes and a big wooden hammer. And
that's why they can tell the jury, hey, remember when you heard that thing just now? No, you didn't. When you're deliberating on, whether or not this person is innocent or guilty, that's not a factor. That level of control is needed in a jury environment.
Right. Yeah, okay. I don't know about 30 days in jail serious. Like, I don't know about...
Well, but that's also an extreme example.
Right, I know
contempt is not
example.
Normally 30 days in jail.
Right, but it's possible.
It is, depending on the conduct.
Right, but they have the power to do that in the extreme cases. Obviously, that is an extreme case. But, like, I once saw a video of a judge. His phone rings in the courtroom, and he immediately fined himself $100 for contempt of court.
Wow, really?
It was fucking hilarious. Because he had been harping on cell phones, and his phone starts ringing, and he's like, oh, my cell phone rang. Okay, I find myself in contempt of court like immediately.
I love that for him.
It's funny as hell. The thing is, though, $100 to the judge is probably nothing, whereas to, like, somebody... Like, the judge, I don't know how much a fucking judge makes, but, like, it's got to be a lot.
It's not nothing.
It's not nothing. Like, they're definitely making six figures, right?
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah. So, but, like, somebody might be sitting there making $11 an hour, or not in Connecticut, they'd be making 12 or 13, whatever it is. Somewhere, I mean, the federal minimum is $7.25. Somebody could be making $7.25 an hour, and then they get fined $100, and that's a day's fucking work.
Yeah. That
shit's crazy. In some countries, they have it so that fines are based on like a percentage of your wealth. So somebody could get this rich guy gets a speeding ticket. It's like 200,000 euros.
My God.
Yeah, but like the guy was like a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, so it's actually preventative.
Right, that's the idea, right? Because like,
because a certain level of fine is only going to be
right.
A problem for people who make a certain amount of money.
If the punishment
it's not illegal
for a crime,
it just costs money.
If the punishment for a crime is a fine, then it's only a crime for poor people. Like, I mean, at UConn,
functionally, yeah.
You have the ultra rich Chinese foreign exchange students come here, drive ridiculously expensive cars, park them wherever they want, rack up tickets, and just pay the tickets. They don't get a parking pass. It's kind of baller. But it points out a complete inequity in the justice system.
Well, sure. I mean, as much as we strive for it, there's inequality in the justice system.
As much as we strive for it? Who's striving for it? Is it Kamala Harris? Girl boss super cop Kamala Harris? Who kept 800 plus, like mostly black offenders in prison, in California state prisons, like past their release date so they could work on fucking forest fires? That super cop Kamala Harris.
Oh well, I mean, if you're gonna cherry pick facts now, but
Facts. You know what I should do? I should get a portrait of Kamala Harris.
I thought you voted for her and Biden.
I did not.
He showed me the ballot. He absolutely did.
Of course he did, because
he had
fake,
extras
just like
too.
the rest of his votes.
Extra envelopes, extra ballots. He was really proud of that.
It's a joke, by the way. I'm not claiming that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election. What I am claiming is that I don't actually give a fuck. I don't know who won. I don't know if there was any sort of thing. I don't care. I think the system's rigged anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. But what I want a Kamala Harris portrait, but one of those ones on the internet that I've seen that's made up of the faces of the men that she kept in prison past their release dates.
Oh, I've not seen that.
Yeah, it's a thing. It would be funny if it wasn't really fucking horrible, but yeah. Yeah, no one's working to make it better. I mean,
there are plenty of people working to make it better.
They're not in the positions of power to do it, though.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit.
Of power are the types of people who are not going to make it much better, and that is a good segue to elitism and how lawyers are largely representative and disproportionately represented. They're white people. Asian people, Jewish people are disproportionately in this upper class, right? They're disproportionately and richer people in general.
Sure.
Like white Asians and Jews are all disproportionately make more money than like blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, right? So it's like all of these classes, and also just like if somebody is black or Hispanic and they're at the law school or they're a lawyer, they're more likely to be richer. They're more likely to be more wealthy. And the white people there, and white, Asian, Jewish, all of them. And not that Jews aren't white. I mean, they're white, but it's like another...
I mean, yeah, it's not like it's impossible for someone who's poor to go to law school and become a lawyer. But when you think about the track, which is 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school, and then, in some states, you're going to be paying close to $1,000 plus every single time you take the bar. So like there are a lot of financial roadblocks, and there is, financial aid available, but it's going to cost a lot of money one way or the other. So
it's like, yes, some people can do it who are poor, black, Hispanic, whatever.
But it's just that it's going to be harder for people who don't have those resources to begin with. That's just a fact.
And that is, we see as a result of that the population is more likely to be more rich, and as a result represent the populations that are more rich, more. And then there's going to be less representation of, there's not a lot of poor whites up in the lawyer, and just like there's not a lot of black and Hispanic people in general because they're disproportionately poor. So there's
unless you're talking about public defenders, then poor white actually does describe a fair amount of them.
Well, okay, but
I know what you mean. When I'm saying you're talking
about
demographics entering the legal profession,
right?
generally.
Right. I'm talking about their upbringing, like their socioeconomic class when they were born. There's plenty of people who, move up in socioeconomic class.
Yeah.
Right here, motherfucker. But that's not super likely. It's less likely. It's not likely for people to move up or move down. It's more likely for people to stay in the social class that they were in.
Yeah.
Except now that the middle class is kind of going away, it's, maybe not. But that was true for a long time. It's true for a very long time. But yeah, at a population level, it's more likely to have those people. And those procedures in the courtroom, it feels a little bit like deference to your betters. All the names and stuff.
Yeah, I mean...
You got to speak to people a certain way.
You don't refer to anyone else as your honor.
Besides
if you called even the president of the United States your honor, he'd think it... I mean, probably because they'd like, he's not a judge or a lawyer. What do you do? Yeah. Well, actually, he need to go to law school.
There is a name like your honor that's for... That's for like elected officials. It might be different for the president, but it's like... Oh, crap. I keep talking. I'm gonna look this up.
Well, but either way, it's not common.
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. Like, it certainly could be interpret it as deferential. I mean, you have to be deferential to the proceedings. I think it's one thing to treat the process and the people involved with respect, but you put anyone in a position of power and there's going to be some level of abuse, whether it's just a matter of, bullying someone else in court or actually, engaging in misconduct.
Or, selling
have you
kids
seen
to
the
private
video of
prisons
the
for $700.
Have you seen the video of the judge who told the lawyer, like, if you want to settle this, let's just go in the back hallway, we'll fight right now, and then they did?
I was horrified.
Yeah,
I was
insane.
legitimately horrified. That was crazy. Like I did see that and I was like, and it did not sound like a calm, like it was a fight.
No, and if I remember correctly, I haven't seen the video in a long time, the attorney was trying to explain that he couldn't do something given the circumstances, so he didn't either have the right information or time or whatever it was to properly serve his client. And so it wasn't like he was simply arguing with the judge because he felt like arguing or he wanted the judge to take his side. It was he was trying to do something that he should, as the attorney of this man, advocate for, because there was some kind of flaw or imperfection in the procedures or proceeding in general. So like it wasn't like he was just trying to pick a fight and this judge simply didn't like the word no. His word had to be law right then and there. But again, that's why we have all these procedures, because even judges are bound in certain situations by whether it's procedure or law, whatever it is. They can't simply just act however they want, but courtroom etiquette, and the deference we provide towards them does make it seem like that.
Dude, that is a ride or die fucking lawyer. That client was standing there.
It's
the
a
lawyer
zealous
goes,
advocate. He's doing his job. It's a zealous advocate. He's doing his job.
Hell yeah, dude. That's sick. If I were that client, I'd be very impressed. Your lawyer's in the other room beating the shit out of the judge.
Unfortunately, I think the judge came back and sat down, so I don't know if the lawyer won. I'd still be impressed as the client, but...
I mean, it's okay.
If you're fighting a judge, is winning really an option?
What happened? Does that judge
do you
get
just
in trouble?
throw it?
What?
Do you just throw the fight?
I don't know.
It ends when you knock the judge out and he's lying on the floor? What happens next?
You probably get arrested.
You think?
But if there's video of the judge instigating the fight and then them agreeing to fight, is that illegal? That's like...
but someone's going to walk around the corner and see you standing over an unconscious judge in the back hallway.
It's recorded. So what is that called? Mutual combat or something like that. That's illegal in a lot of states, right? If two people agree to fight, they can fucking fight.
I mean, in certain situations, yeah.
And that seems like one of them, when they're both like, you want to fight? Yeah, I want to fight. Let's fight. And then they fight.
I don't know if that's necessarily legal.
Well, they both get arrested?
Well, bar fights might be... consensual in the sense that both parties, but you're still committing a assault or battery.
I'm telling you, this is a thing. This is a fucking thing. But let's talk about it in this case. Do you know what happened to that fucking judge?
Oh, I don't think he's a sitting judge anymore.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it was egregious. No one saw that and went, "Yeah, that's justice done right."
I mean, it's kind of baller that he came back in and sat back down and tried to keep doing his job. That's some shit, man.
Yeah, but now this guy's sitting there in a courtroom without a lawyer present, and the judge is still doing his thing.
Really?
Yeah,
that's weird.
Gross misconduct.
Yeah. So
that's why he's not a judge anymore, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. What state was this? Was in Tennessee or something?
Remember.
I feel like it was in some holler down somewhere. I don't even know what a holler means. Somebody told me it recently when I was in Florida. I was out in the fucking boonies of Florida.
It's been a while since I've seen the video. I don't know if they had a really thick accent or anything like that though.
They're probably somewhere in the Midwest in some small town.
Well, it was definitely the United States.
It was definitely the U.S. It could have been Alberta. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
See, the judge would have apologized while he was beating that lawyer's ass in the hallway.
I'm going to take your fucking maple syrup. That wasn't a Canadian accent.
You tried, though.
Whatever. If you can call that trying. Okay. But that's okay, so this comes back to racism is what it comes down to. It mostly does with the criminal justice system. But the way that fucking people talk, the way that people talk in a courtroom, the way that you have to talk with the procedures and everything, I don't fucking talk like that.
No one does.
I get it, no one does, but it's closer to the way that I talk as like a fucking preppy New Englander, right? Than it is for somebody who lives in like Mississippi. And I feel like the language itself is one of these many gatekeepers. Like there's so many things intended to just fucking push out those goddamn poor plebs and keep in the good stock Norman English fucking Protestant blood.
Are you talking about, just to clarify, like honorifics specifically is what you're taking issue with, or generally just the way we speak in the courtroom and it being complex and maybe not palatable to, or at least imminently, like, immediately understandable to the common person? And to some degree, I agree with you.
And in law, and in like law documents.
I mean,
and that comes into bills as well.
The law being accessible, or like the accessibility of the law, is a concern because you want people to be able to understand what the law is, but at the same time,
Hammurabi was supposed to solve this problem, by the way.
Yeah, but like it's also one of those things where it's kind of become a necessary evil. The law is very specific. It's legalese. It's almost like a different language.
But that's that institution making it that way. It doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't.
It doesn't have to, but it
does have to be complex. You're going to have a lot of terms in references that it's going to be more complex when you're making a legal argument. It has to be airtight. You have to have, use the right word in the right circumstance because, either different fields or different laws are going to define them differently. And all of those things are good things because it's making those laws theoretically as clear as they can. And even though you have to go to law school to understand that, if you can be as specific as possible when writing a law, it should be better.
You have been drinking the Kool-Aid. Now explain to me why this means that there has to be a 7,000 word bill on sending $50 billion to Ukraine while funding Filipino transgender drone operators or something like that.
You want a real lawyer's answer?
Yes.
Well, I'm not a real lawyer, so go find one first. But
that's what a real lawyer would say because
lawyers are thorough. The law has to be as thorough as possible.
I don't think it's thorough. I think, well, look, in the case of laws being written at the federal level, that shit's not thorough. It's just purposefully complicated. 7,000 pages. Someone can fit in 30 pages about how they're going to give a tax cut for having fucking racehorses.
Well, but you weren't supposed to read that part, Sam.
Of course I was. Okay. No one's supposed to read that part. That's why it goes out to 5,000.
That's why we put it on page 5,693.
Exactly, right. So that somebody can get their fucking
And don't think we've thought of your little tricks, okay? We didn't use the word tax, cut, or break anywhere in there, so don't even try and control F that shit.
Exactly.
You're not going to find
That's the thing.
All right?
See, Trump wanted to simplify the tax code. I mean, at least he said he did. I don't know if he really wanted to or if he really tried, but I think there was a lot of resistance to that type of idea because I think that the tax code being the way it is has created this environment where Warren Buffett pays a lower percentage of taxes than his goddamn secretary.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing a little bit of devil's advocate here.
No, you should do that.
Because on one side, you do want the law to be a little bit wordy if it means you can be as specific as possible. You're going to have, certain terms of art that need to be well defined, and when a lawyer says it, it might have a different colloquial meaning, but the other lawyers in the room, the judge, know you're talking about the law. And while it should be also as accessible as possible, in some situations you're not going to be able to avoid complexity. In others, you absolutely are, and they do make it needlessly complex.
And that makes sense.
It's a human system, so it's going to be imperfect. And it's going to be not as simple as we think it should be. So in some areas it's good, and in a lot of areas it's bad. But it should be something where the people should be able to understand what the law is. If ignorance isn't a defense, they should at least be able to understand what the laws are governing them.
Yeah, well, that's not true. Because there's something like the average American breaks 3 felonies a day. Yeah, seriously.
A day?
Yeah, it's just there's...
What are the felonies?
There's so many redundant, ridiculous laws that cover everything to the point where anyone could be arrested at any time for anything. And that's kind of where we're at. I wish I remembered what I was reading.
Yeah, now I'm curious because as far as I know, I don't commit any felonies a day.
Okay.
And I don't think you do.
3 felonies a day. Oh, it's a book. There is a book called 3 Felonies a Day, How the Feds Target the Innocent. Yeah, so I haven't read this book, but somebody was talking about it somewhere. Okay, I'm just going to read this little synopsis. The average professional in this country wakes up in the morning, goes to work, comes home, eats dinner, and then goes to sleep, unaware that he or she has likely committed several federal crimes that day. Why? The answer lies in the very nature of modern federal criminal laws, which have exploded in number but also become impossibly broad and vague. In 3 Felonies a Day, Harvey A. Silverglate, that's a cool name, reveals how federal criminal laws have become dangerously disconnected from the English common law tradition, and how prosecution can pin arguable federal crimes on any one of us for even the most seemingly innocuous behavior. The volume of federal crimes in recent decades has increased well beyond the statute books and into the mores of the Code of Federal Regulations. My eyes, I have an issue with my eyes. I'm just going to make that closer for a second. Handing federal prosecutors an additional trove of vague and exceedingly complex and technical prohibitions to stick on their hapless targets. The dangers spelled out in 3 Felonies a Day do not apply solely to white-collar criminals, state and local politicians and professionals. Do not apply solely to them. No social class or profession is safe from this troubling form of social control by the executive branch, and nothing less than the integrity of our constitutional democracy hangs in the balance. So, yeah, the argument of this book, and I don't know.
It's not dramatic at all.
Yeah, well, come on. It's a nonfiction book. All books are really supposed to be dramatic. They have to be. Yeah, and I think there was also there was a time, and I'm gonna Google this while we're on the air as well. I mean, do you want to say how you feel about what I just read?
I want to know more. I can see how in certain industries that might be more true than others, particularly when it comes to like finance. There are a lot of regulations just about how you conduct business, whether it's, handling how you handle documents or things like that, that can be really tricky. I mean, the level of bureaucracy is complex. So there are going to be things that slip through your cracks, but my gut reaction is I would doubt that the average person commits 3 felonies a day unknowingly, or even that it could be plausibly pinned on them. Like he says that it's, arguable, which...
I mean, you have to read the book to
yeah,
to
exactly. I just want to know more. My gut reaction is I'd be surprised if the average person commits 3 felonies a day.
Let's just assume that it's true. If it's true, then that means that they can arrest you at any time for anything if they want to. And that feels like a power that...
Well, if they have evidence of
But they can get the
committed.
evidence. If it's true that you're doing it, then they can just get the evidence. They can lock onto you, get the evidence, and take you down. For some reason other than the actual crime that's been committed. There's plenty of situations where somebody does something wrong that everyone else does, but they get picked.
Sure.
Why do they get picked? Right? It's always like some other reason. So there was...
It's pretextual.
What?
It's pretextual.
I don't know what that means.
It's not the actual motive, like pretextual stop. Oh, I saw you had, a blinker out, but really, I think you look like a drug dealer, so I'm going to stop. I stopped you for a legal reason, but the pretext of the stop was something different.
It's a little bit different because when you're charged with one of these crimes, it's something that you did do, and it is that thing, and there isn't anything like it's not like it's a traffic stop for a light, and then you're like, oh, it smells like marijuana here. It's like, I'm going to arrest you for doing this thing that everyone around you is doing, that thing, but I'm picking you because you did something else entirely.
Exactly. Pretextual. They're using that thing everyone does as an excuse, but the motivation behind you getting charged with it was, as you said, something else entirely, right?
Yeah, but in the case of the light, yes, they're comparable, but in the case of the light, and there's a reason why it's importantly different, and I need to think about it, but in the case of the light, yes, having the light out is illegal because it's a safety issue, but they come up and then they find other stuff.
Oh, no. See, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not, because if you conduct a valid traffic stop and then you find something after the fact, there's no pretext for it. You just happen to come across other potential crimes. It'd be like I'm just looking at the type of car and I go, yeah, I think that car would be driven by a drug dealer or, you know.
Right, but that's not legal. They're not allowed to do that. They are allowed to pull someone over because they have a light out and then look for other shit. And police officers have personally admitted to me that they do that. It's not a secret that they do that to find other shit.
No, because as long as it's a valid traffic stop, pretext or motivation doesn't matter. He still did his job.
Right, exactly. But in the case of like, in the case of like, for example, this happened with the federal government against some conservative groups. I think it might have even been Donald Trump that they targeted with like, they specifically targeted them for tax stuff. And they targeted them more than other groups. And, you know, presumably they weren't like larger offenders. They were doing things that everybody does, but they had to like they did something wrong and they found, but they charged them with these tax crimes. You know, I should know more about it before I like talk about it like that. But, yeah, if there are enough laws in society where they can just charge you with a crime, then that means that they can pick a crime, pin it on you, make you look really bad for doing that thing, even though a bunch of other people are doing it. Like right now, this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, who's getting like behind FTX. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Right. So it seems like he did do something like particularly very bad.
Yeah, it seems egregious.
It's very egregious. But like even like, so maybe it's a bad example because it's egregious, but the shit that he's doing is stuff that like Goldman Sachs does like every day. Maybe not to the extent that he does it,
but like regular practice within the industry.
In
Maybe not, you know, predominantly or like the majority of people do it, but like it's something that's accepted within the community.
Well, I mean, even legally, like we were talking about fines earlier, there are corporate fines for corporations, and they're usually very low. And a lot of the times the companies will factor in that cost to how profitable something will be. So they'll just do something illegal because they know that the fine is lower. 3M did this when they sold, they had defective earplugs that they sold to the U.S. military. People in the company knew that they didn't work. A bunch of veterans got hearing loss, myself included. I don't know if I can blame 3M for it, but I was using their defective earplugs and I got hearing loss. So, you know, I think I can. And 3M knew about it, but they were like, well, it would cost us more than the lawsuit will cost. So we're just going to send them out. Because that's their fiduciary responsibility to their clients, right?
Yeah.
It is. Because that's the system. I'm going to do a whole episode on corporations that I need to do, and the corporate structure and how it.
I mean, there are also obligations not to expose your shareholders or investors to liability.
Yeah.
So, without knowing more about the specific situation or just finance in general,
there should have been a larger fine, really, a larger fine to make them not do that. But there are all these corporate fines, like companies like Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. They get fined all the time for shit.
Oh yeah.
But the fines are so low, but they're charged with that stuff, and the company has committed that crime, right? Like that's what they say, but it doesn't lead to a change in behavior because the fine is too small, and it's just a cost of doing business rather than an actual criminal thing. Like it's rather than actually dissuading them from doing it, so they just keep doing it, which is not good. It's not good, but I forgot how we got on this.
You were talking about Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, but, you know, Bankman-Fried, what he did was kind of egregious. But, like, he's a scapegoat, almost. Like, and I don't feel bad for the guy. He's a fucking billionaire. But, like, they just got to sacrifice one of their own every once in a while, I guess.
Yeah.
When
the ones that get caught.
What?
The ones that get caught.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know what it is, man, because there's connections. Like, he was the Democrats' either first or second largest donor. And he also has significant connections of moving money through Ukraine. And, like, I'm not interested in as much in this, but, like, it's pretty, like, it might go up to, like, the top, really. Like, this could be corruption, like, at the top of the DNC. And I think that a natural person's reaction, at least one in New England, is going to be to hear me say that and just be like, well, no, that's propaganda. That's not happening. The Democrats are corrupt. The Republicans are corrupt. All this shit. I mean, they're both fucking corrupt, is what I think. But Sam Bankman-Fried is being... I mean, he's being blamed for this. I think he clearly did some illegal-ass shit, and he stole people's money. But that's a Tuesday for Wall Street.
Well, yeah. Of course, all of that was stemming from, if they can just charge you with any crime they want, then you're living in a state that's far too controlling. I think that's...
The law code should be simple is the ultimate point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it should be it should be simple enough that
it should be simple as it needs to be.
Right. And it should be like applied to the same level, like, and it's impossible to do this in practice, but like it should be applied to the same level, maybe not. It's tough because like then you get into like RoboCop, right? Because like if RoboCop
yeah, he records the circumstances of whatever's going on, and his brain pulls up, criminal code, XYZ.
Yeah.
And then administers justice and sentencing there on the spot. Obviously, in RoboCop...
I haven't really seen the movie, so like...
Oh, really? It's fantastic.
But I understand the concept.
It's so good.
I'll watch it. But it's like they're applying the letter of the law in all situations, right? And like if there's something that is illegal that a lot of people do, but somebody is getting arrested for it, they're either getting arrested because they got caught, and that's true sometimes, but I think a lot of the times, or some of the times, I think a lot of the times, somebody is getting charged because...
Of some other reason.
Some other fucking reason. Because somebody wants to get them charged. Like, there was a guy, and there was a Netflix documentary about him. And he had ripped off a bunch of rich people and given them, like, fake wine. He embarrassed a lot of rich people, too, with these huge wine collections. When I say rich, I mean, like it might have been, like, billionaires, even.
Oh, rich.
Rich. Like, yeah. Wealthy, like, yeah. And this guy got, like, he got sentenced to, like, this huge, long prison sentence. Which, is a thing in America. It's pretty common, but usually not for like white collar type crimes like that. Yeah. Which is a different conversation that should be had. But what it points out is that in this situation, this guy committed this thing. What they speculated happened is he ripped off the wrong person who pulled into favor with the judge and was like, this guy fucked me, fuck him back. And he got fucked. So he pissed off the rich people. He pissed off the wrong person. But, if you... Like Bernie Madoff stole from the rich people and celebrities.
Yeah.
If you stole from, if you stole from the working class of Americans, you got a promotion at Deutsche Bank. So it's not like,
yeah,
it's a different thing. It's, yeah.
I mean, yeah, what? The end of The Big Short, it's one guy went to prison. And
Some schmuck in New Jersey.
Wasn't he a foreigner too?
Oh, yeah, he was like...
Yeah.
He was Israeli, or like
he was
Greek or something?
Something like that, but no one who was, born and raised here and work...
He was like a middle manager from another country.
Yeah.
Who was definitely a member of the elite, but like...
And of course, the fact that it was just one guy.
It was just one fucking guy.
One guy.
Like, at that point, don't even... Like, it's not... Just leave that guy alone.
Yeah.
You don't
Although,
need to.
It is interesting to see how some of that culture in the legal community changes after things like that.
Yeah.
It's moving more towards the right place, particularly like in the areas of securities and finance with compliance. But again, it's one of those things where...
I doubt it.
It is. That's why the field of compliance grew and really began after the fact. They're trying to change the legal culture around the way we do business in some of those areas.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying that the SEC does their job and they don't.
Well, that's definitely not what I was saying.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't fucking know. Talking legal jargon at me. I don't know what the fuck you're saying.
I'm talking about legal culture.
Speak English, bro. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, but that's just because you just don't try to listen.
I'm trying. I'm just dumb.
So compliance in the securities in like finance area after 2008 leaned more towards, and this just gets back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier before we started recording about zealous advocate versus public servant.
Yeah, can you explain both of those?
Yeah, so in the field of compliance specifically. And so compliance is making sure you're in line and following the applicable laws in your field. And typically, a compliance officer, who is probably a lawyer, but he might not be at a company, make sure that you're doing all the things correctly. And then if something goes wrong, there are procedures you follow to make sure it doesn't happen again. Or in certain like more extreme scenarios, you report that misconduct yourself. Now, in business, you get cooperation credits in areas for self-reporting. So this is part of what they were trying to do after '08, particularly with the field of compliance, is making sure that companies take an active role in monitoring their bad conduct, because a lot of times misconduct, and obviously this doesn't apply to larger examples, but the majority of misconduct at a company that occurs is going to be on an individual level. That's where they work, whether it's something basic like, making use of materials at the company that are there for you, but you're really misusing them, you're taking too much or whatever it is, you're wasting them. Most misconduct at companies occurs at an individual level, but the systems in place either encourage it or don't. So when you're Enron and your employees are individually making all these crazy claims, it's not because they received a directive from up high that said, tell them whatever you need, just get it done, sell, sell, sell. It's because the systems there weren't built to prevent that nor manage it going forward. And while obviously tone at the top, which is going to be about what the executives are telling you to do, is incredibly important for compliance, that's just one factor. You have to have systems in place, compliance systems in place, programs to make sure that people are doing their job correctly. So for securities and investment and all that, you might actually report your own misconduct. There is plenty of considerations you take into account, but you report to the correct authorities and you'll receive cooperation credit. It's kind of like admitting, yes, we did this, but you work with them to resolve it and ideally prevent it from happening again.
So some sort of internal investigator would coordinate with the feds. So some internal...
Not necessarily coordinate.
Or cooperate with the feds. So
yeah,
somebody who's in internal compliance in a company, they will, when they find some misconduct committed by a different individual at the company, they will then let the feds know and cooperate with them.
Yes.
Okay.
One area this is really easy to talk about is actually international trade. Obviously, if you are a defense contractor or you make something like assault rifles or any kind of, even drones, because some of them can fly so far nowadays and you can attach certain things to them that they would qualify legally as a missile. So anything like that, any kind of sensitive information, any kind of particularly potentially dangerous product, you have to make sure that you're selling them to the right people. So some people you're not going to be able to sell things to. And if you discover one day that in the factory where you're making body armor for U.S. military forces, a foreign national who's been placed on the SDN, the Specially Designated Nationals list, there's someone you can't sell to, you can't give any specific, without getting into too much of the jargon, any specific product from this list got sold or information got potentially exposed to them, they might just be in the room where schematics were on a computer, but they were pulled up at the time. You'd want to report that, because if the government finds out, they're going to be particularly mad about it if they're finding out on their own. But it'd also be really bad if those, military vests showed up on someone else's market. So when something like that happens, you want to report as fast as possible, because that's the best thing legally for you to do. And that's what compliance in general is trying to get at, is that misconduct's going to occur. It's not always the company's fault, because they can't micromanage every aspect of your life. It's their responsibility to conduct business in a way where they have programs and systems in place that work to prevent it and manage it when it does happen. So ideally, you'll have a better chance at preventing it from happening again.
Yeah.
They want you to set up systems like whistleblower lines for the company, so someone at a lower level can report these things. Your chief compliance officer doesn't want to be finding out about it way after the fact. He wants to have systems in place where if something goes wrong, the company can handle it.
It also seems like this would allow, I feel like a lot of these large financial institutions are doing things that are so fucking immoral, and they might not be illegal, or they might not be like, they might be illegal, but they might be like ignored, even though they're technically illegal. And like, I don't trust them to internally regulate themselves. It feels like cooperation with the feds would just allow them to be smarter and hide the real fucked up shit in different spots until it's found out, I guess. But there's also so many different parts to these companies.
So, and like, that's part of the reason you'll have things like, I want to say they're called, believe it or not, CIA's corporate integrity agreements. Yeah, corporate integrity agreements, which, if you get found, if misconduct of yours is discovered, some of the regulatory agencies might make you sign these agreements, and then you're going to have additional obligations and responsibilities, whether it be reporting or whatever it is. So there was a case in 2010. Pfizer had acquired several pharmaceutical companies.
Pfizer, they always act very, very ethically.
I've never heard anything bad.
Never done anything bad.
No.
Never. Not even once. They should be given awards.
You should really paint this house pink.
That was a deep cut reference.
It really was.
Little pink house. Pfizer tried to use eminent domain. Well, they did successfully.
They did use eminent domain.
And they didn't even take the land in New London, Connecticut. Yep. Right here in our own Connecticut.
And then built a really great facility on top, right?
No.
Oh, no, they planned to. That's right. Then they moved somewhere else.
And then they went to the next city over.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what they did.
Anyway, so Pfizer acquires these companies. They have, they'd engaged in misconduct and various practices. They had violations prior to acquisition. And, Pfizer had engaged in some of their own practices that maybe weren't the best. But either way, so that after they acquired these companies, with full knowledge of all this stuff, they had committed to these corporate integrity agreements. The compliance officer essentially did his job. He conveyed his findings to the board of directors in order to curb misconduct. He reported the things he needed to, but nothing got done.
Yeah, of course not.
And so after the fact, it became more expensive. They found that the compliance officer had done his job. He'd protected the company, so now these board members were liable.
Right.
So not only can the company... So compliance will make dealing with misconduct cheaper. If you do your job as a compliance officer and you get the cooperation credits or whatever it is, you work with the agencies, your misconduct will be cheaper and you're not exposing your top executives to potential liability. So even though compliance is far from perfect, and it's still a relatively young field, particularly within the law, its goal is to change the way the legal culture operates in these industries so that it's less hazardous to those who would be affected by the misconduct. Obviously, it's not perfect. I'm not saying Wall Street and the financial institutions are angels, but compliance is really a response to the legal culture and an environment that existed at the time that allowed things to escalate in '08. Everyone knew that what the subprime dealers were doing was wrong, but the system didn't acknowledge it.
The system incentivized it.
It incentivized it and benefited from it.
Right. Because the system was like, all these big financial institutions are making billions.
Yeah. So
trillions.
you can't just make a couple changes and have something like that fixed. Right. You have to try to attack it at the root of its problem.
Yeah.
And whether it's business practices, culture, or
tradition,
whatever you want to call it, that's what compliance aims to get at.
But it feels like an incomplete, like it feels like, yes, okay, what you're saying in theory sounds amazing. It sounds great, but it's the laws that need to change, and the level of prosecution needs to change. Like after 2008, should have done what Iceland did. Iceland let the banks fail, and they and I would talk about this more with more detail, but essentially they let the banks fail, and they sent people that did illegal shit to prison. We didn't do that in America, and I think we're dealing right now with the fallout from that. So like, they might be doing certain things good. I'm sure they are. It sounds very interesting. Honestly, it does sound cool. I would like to work in something like that. Like I used to work in environmental compliance, right? So I was
I've done the same thing. Yeah,
internal environmental compliance with like environmental laws, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that job. But if the laws are not being prosecuted correctly, like my reports, they wouldn't matter at all. And that's kind of what's the situation I was in was, except for certain ones. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, and environment's a tricky, because I did some work for an environmental nonprofit in doing essentially environmental compliance. And the environment specifically is kind of trickier to talk about, at least than like the big banks, because there are a lot of groups that are like already incentivized into getting in the picture and staking a claim. So like, you know, it's, dare I say, like easier to tell whether or not someone's in compliance with like a NIPD's permit, which is a discharge, a polluting permit, essentially. You can put this much of whatever it is you produce into the water. Well, you can test that water really easily. You can't look at the bank's books necessarily as easily.
Yeah.
And so with environment, compliance is obviously just as important, but I feel like it's one of those things, particularly because of the regulations that have been passed in the past decades, that kind of brought it a little bit to the forefront. And there are a lot of groups that can do work to ensure that. It's harder when it becomes even more bureaucratic and you're digging through numbers rather than water samples.
Right. And that's how they can hide certain things.
Absolutely. I mean, you can certainly hide pollution, just it's a little bit easier if you can tell them, no, you can't come in my office right now.
Yeah.
If I can just walk up to the river next to your factory, you might have a problem.
But it could be a matter of, right. So, it also could be a matter of like small, like, you know, it could be 10 parts per million versus 100 parts per million, and you're not even going to be able to tell, but it could be fucking really bad, you know, even though it doesn't look any different. But okay, we've been here for a while. Last question I'm going to ask you before we go.
Okay.
Why is Richard Nixon the greatest president of the last 50 years? Wait.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Who?
Richard Nixon.
Who?
Richard Nixon.
Never heard of him.
Dick Nixon.
Oh, okay. Well, that should tell you all, I think. You need to know.
Okay. All right. Richard Nixon was the best. This is pre-neoliberalism. Neoliberalism has destroyed America. I've been here with Ben. Ben shares all of my opinions, and he condones everything that I say before and later on this podcast. Okay, great. Have a good day.